What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player. My name is Devololol, and we're back on the SOD train today. I want to spend a little time talking about the current endgame content available in Phase 1, both the raid and the Ashenvale PvP event, and then taking what we've learned about Blizzard's approach at level 25, think about where the season can go in future phases. Let's start with the raid. I've cleared it a few times now. Our community guild on Wild Growth has been doing it every reset, which, by the way, open invites, just send me a whisper. I'll put details in the description. Overall, I think the raid is really well done. There's a couple nitpicks, but it fits in well with the other content available at level 25. It's challenging at points, but still puggable. And the gear is meaningful enough that it's worth farming, but I'm not worried that anything in there is going to be my best in slot for the rest of the season. I'm going to put a slight pin in the gear discussion for now, just because it's part of a deeper topic that I want to get into in a future episode. But for purposes of this video, I would summarize my thoughts as there's definitely items in there that I want, but I'm expecting that I'm going to replace most, if not all of them, by the time I'm farming the next raid at level 40. Now, about the difficulty. I actually think they kind of nailed it, especially for this level band. By the way, now that we're basically 3 weeks into the season, I'm not going to worry about spoilers for anything in Phase 1 anymore. I figure at this point, if you're still wanting to hit it blind, well, honestly, that ship has kind of sailed, so I'm just not going to worry about it. Anyway, difficulty-wise, they kind of hit what I'd call the sweet spot for a raid like this. The bosses have mechanics, and some of them might take a fair bit of effort for a raid team to figure out completely on their own, but once you understand them, for the most part, they're pretty easy to handle. The one real exception is Twilight Lord Kelris, but I'm going to talk about him in a minute because he's kind of an odd case. But every other fight in there, you can explain to a pug in like 2 or 3 sentences tops. Baron Aquinas, jump down for the debuff, watch out for the beam if you're melee. Gamura, tank swap the debuff, don't touch bubbles. Saraves, spread out, don't touch the ice. Kill ads if you want, it's whatever. Gelahast, tank swap the debuff, don't touch purple things. Kill tentacles if you want. Lorgus Jet, interrupt healers, kill ads, kill the lightning totem. Twilight Lord Kelris, we'll come back to him. Akumai, don't get breathed on, kill ads, clear debuffs when the tank needs it. And yeah, there's other things going on most of those fights. Like, I'm sure someone right now is going, but the bubbles on the turtle boss give you mana or whatever. And it's like, yeah, sure, that's true, but you don't need to use that to kill him, so it kind of doesn't matter. It's not really important as far as the strategy for killing the boss fight goes. And then there's Kelris. I've got 2 main thoughts on him. First off, he's the 6th boss of a 7-boss raid. It's actually kind of fine for him to be sort of a pug stopper / gear check. He's still totally doable for a decent pug or a well-organized under-geared raid team. But even if you don't get him, 5 out of 7 bosses is still worth your time. But I also think most of the difficulty on Kelris is just because he's kind of a mess of a fight. Like, if you get a pull where he behaves, the strategy is pretty simple. Phase 1, you interrupt chains, ranged groups up, kill priestesses until you get a portal if you get put to sleep. Phase 2, everyone spreads out and you just burn him. The issue is just that his mechanics are super finicky and inconsistent, which means there's so many things that can go differently from pull to pull that if you're struggling on him, oftentimes the best thing to do is just keep pulling and hope you get a better pull next time. Here's a couple examples just from our own guild runs. Now, normally the first 2 people he puts to sleep are just the 2 that are closest to him. So we will have a tank and a melee DPS stand on top of each other at the start of the pull, so they're the ones that get sent. On one pull, he cast an early chains, we interrupted it, and then he decided to move just slightly, and at that same moment, sent both tanks. On another pull, he sent an undergeared mage and a resto druid right before the start of Phase 2, and they still managed to kill several priestesses, but none of them gave them a portal, so they just died in the phase. Now, neither of those 2 things are worth re-strategizing around because they're relatively uncommon, and frankly, it's not worth making the fight more complicated over. So we just pull again. There's a few other things I could ramble about on Kelris, like how his Mind Blast targets the second on threat, even though most classes are missing most of their threat tools at level 25, or how sometimes you get a portal on like the 3rd or 4th priestess, and sometimes it takes 6 or 7, or how there's void walkers in the dream state that seem to have something to do with the void zones, but there's no time to do anything with them anyway, so it doesn't matter. Just kind of a weird fight where some pulls are way more difficult than others, which can be super frustrating depending on your group's gear and skill level, because You know it's doable. You just have to keep pulling until he takes it easy on you. Either way, once people have more gear, the fight gets easy just because you have an easier time recovering. And Blizzard did just put out a hotfix that makes him a lot easier on casters, so it's entirely possible that it's all a moot point by now anyway. I just haven't been in there again since the hotfix went out. Also, while I was in the middle of making this video, they just hotfixed him again to solve the problem of people getting killed at the start of phase 2 because they're in the wrong phase. So anyway, overall, I think the raid lands about where it needed to as new content with a classic feel. It fits well alongside the other content available in phase 1. It's a good length. It's got a few tricks, but nothing too crazy. And the bosses, even Kelric, feel appropriate for a classic raid. Just please stop comparing it to Molten Core. Mr. Smite has more mechanics than half the bosses in Molten Core. Moving on, I want to really quickly touch on the Ashenvale PvP event. Now, I haven't farmed it extensively yet, though there are a few things that I want to get from it. So we might come back to this topic if my opinions end up changing. But so far, it seems fine for what it is. At least since the changes they made last week to require you to kill all the lieutenants first and also incentivize you to defend your own lieutenants, I think it hits more or less the vibe they were going for, which is an open world PvPvE event in the same vein as the events in Silithus and Eastern Plaguelands. Which is to say that the objectives are PvE based and don't directly require any PvP, but you can attack the opposing faction to slow them down a bit and also give your faction more time to complete those objectives. It's obviously had a few issues here and there, which they have been hotfixing, but the dust seems to have mostly settled, and I think it achieves what Blizzard set out to do. And the reason I say all that is because I've seen a lot of people complaining about it in ways that seem like the problem isn't the Ashenvale event. The problem is that the person complaining just wanted something different. Like people going, this is basically just a Zergfest. Yes, that's what these are. Or saying, this is just a lot of grinding. Yes, that's what these are. Or I'm spending more time walking from place to place than I am PvPing. Yes, that's what these are. Now, do I personally find it to be the most engaging content? No, not really, which is why I haven't spent a lot of time on it yet. And while some of the rewards are cool and all, there's nothing in there that won't get replaced in phase 2. So it's really not worth losing sanity over if it's just not for you. So now then, looking back on everything we've seen over the course of phase 1, where can we expect things to go from here? Well, we already know a fair bit about the plans for phase 2. Level cap of 40, Gnomrigan converted into a raid, and we know there's going to be some new runes as well. Rumors have been floating around about that dropping maybe sometime in mid-January, which makes sense, but I haven't seen anything concrete or official that confirms that yet. I do think Gnomrigan is a great focus point for the phase 2 raid for the same reason that Blackfathom Deeps was. Gnomrigan is one of those dungeons where most people just either skip it entirely or just run it once or twice for the quest and then never go back again. And even then, the average Gnomrigan run skips like 80% of the dungeons. So there's a lot of space and several bosses in there that no one ever goes to just because there's no reason to. Plenty of opportunity to spruce all of that up a bit and expand on it. And putting it as the level 40 raid means it'll fit in nicely alongside dungeons like Razorfen Crawl, Razorfen Downs, Scarlet Monastery, depending on what they do with that, which we'll come back to. But like how we have, Shadowfang Keep, Dead Mines, and to some extent Wailing Caverns as the sort of like endgame content for level 25 alongside the Blackfathom Deeps raid, I can see Gnomrigan fitting in very well for phase 2 at level 40. They've also dropped a few hints about a new zone-wide PvP event in Stranglethorn Vale, which makes sense. We don't know exactly what that'll be yet, but there was a post a couple weeks ago that the Stranglethorn fishing tournament would be added in phase 2, so maybe that's related somehow. In fact, one interesting thing that I noticed while I was looking stuff up for this video was how they phrased some of the things in that post. So for the fishing tournament, they said, Stranglethorn fishing tournament will begin with the phase 2 of Season of Discovery. However, for the Arena Master and Arena Grandmaster trinkets, which also come from an event in Stranglethorn, they just said they're not available in phase 1. Now, the fact that they said phase 2 for one and not the other could imply that the Arena Master stuff isn't coming until even later. It could also mean that the Arena is part of whatever they've got in mind for Stranglethorn, which may or may not include the Arena Master trinkets. Or it could be nothing and I'm just wearing too much tinfoil again. It just stuck out to me as interesting. As far as new runes, we don't really have too much to go on just yet, although they did tease something for two-handed enhancement, which I know a lot of classic loving shaman are going to be very excited about. I also know there's some other runes that have been data mined, but they did say before Season of Discovery even launched that some of those are experiments that won't ever actually make it into the game. So I'm not reading too much into those. Also, frankly, I don't want to spoil myself too much. I don't think we'll be getting 12 more per class, though. I'd be guessing somewhere in the 4 to 8 range, probably on a new slot or two like Belt or Helm. In the future beyond Phase 2, we only know a little bit about Phases 3 and 4 so far. Phase 3, we know, is a level cap of 50. And based on what they were teasing at BlizzCon, I'm expecting they're going to do something new with Scarlet Monastery, possibly our level 50 raid. But there's some interesting things about that. Unlike Blackfathom Deeps and Gnomragon, Scarlet Monastery is a place that people tend to farm a lot while leveling. So this wouldn't be a case of taking something most people skip and kind of adding it to the list of viable content, essentially giving people more to do. It would be replacing content. Also, level 50 is kind of a weird time for Scarlet Monastery. Like, everything in there normally is doable at level 40, and the highest drops only require level 39. If it wasn't for the tease at BlizzCon, I'd honestly be saying no shot they even touch it. But I do have a couple of theories on what they might be up to. The first and less interesting of the two is maybe we've got it all wrong, right? Like maybe whatever they're doing in Scarlet Monastery is actually for Phase 2 at level 40 instead of Phase 3. I don't think that's super likely, mostly because they've done a lot of teasing for Phase 2 so far and haven't mentioned Scarlet Monastery at all, but it is possible. The second theory is, ¿por qué no las dos? What if Scarlet Monastery will be completely doable as normal during Phase 2 at level 40, and whatever they're doing for level 50 is more of a return or continuation? Like, maybe we get some new story beats that are a follow-up to the defeat of the Scarlet Crusade, the falling of Whitemane and Mograine, maybe something to do with Fairbanks, maybe even the Ashbringer. This way, it's less about replacing the level 40 content and more about bringing it back for a second round at level 50, while also getting to tell more stories surrounding one of the most iconic locations in World of Warcraft. I don't know how likely that theory is either, but damn, it'd be cool. As far as a PvP event at 50, I could see them maybe adding something new around like Blackrock Mountain or maybe Gadget Zan or Winterspring or something. But it's also possible they just revisit the Eastern Plaguelands event and kind of spruce that up a little bit. And then for Phase 4 at level 60, we're pretty sure we're finally going to get to visit the Karazhan Crypts. I'm not going to speculate too much just yet about what that could mean, but it is one of the most well-known unused locations in WoW, so I'm very excited to see what they end up doing with it. There were also some really great questions that you all left on my last video asking about future stuff for Season of Discovery that I would love to explore a little bit. The first one was from Mr. Scott Nutt, who asked, do you think they will do a new 40-man raid? And it's possible. I'm not sure. I think it's relatively unlikely, though. The thing about 40-player instances is, A, they take a lot of people, and the modern player base for Season of Discovery, like getting 40 people together, is a lot more than what they're asking for a lot of the other content in Season of Discovery. And the other thing is there's a lot of 40-player content at level 60 already for people to go do if 40-player content is what you're after. I think it's more interesting if they add more things that fit other aspects of gameplay, more 10-player instances, more PvP events, things along those lines. That said, I could see something more along the veins of like an Onyxia encounter, maybe just like a one-off boss here or there that is 40-player content, but not a complete full instance. Maybe something that's like just an extra fight here and there. That could be interesting, and that could be pretty cool. Bass Vision Geek 977 asked, I would like to know what you think about SOD and more quality of life. Like, what do you think about transmog, shared loot, area loot, barbershop, and retail animations and skins for the characters as an option? This is kind of a smattering of different things that I have different thoughts on each of them for different reasons. So I'll just go through them one by one. Transmog is one that I'm not completely sure on. I know a lot of people would love to have transmog in Classic, and it doesn't really like have any material effect on anything, but there is something sort of endearing about the Classic mindset of being able to look at someone and see what gear they're wearing and just know what they're equipped with, know what their capabilities are, and know what the best content they've done is. I'm not necessarily saying that's a reason not to implement it, just that that is an aspect of classic gameplay that would be lost in the process, and I think is worth considering. There's a few things that they could have meant by shared loot. My immediate assumption is that they're talking about quest items that drop needing to be shared. Personally, I would love to see that added. I think it would be fine if that was added, but I expect that's probably a lot of work because that would involve manually going through and fixing each individual quest that has quest drops. And there's probably better things for the classic team to be spending their time on. If that's not what you meant by shared loot, though, then just leave a comment and I'll try to give you a better answer. Area loot is one that I think even the most hardcore classic player is going to have a hard time coming up with a good reason why area loot shouldn't be a thing. That I would love to see in the game and think it should be added immediately. Barbershop is another one. Like, let me change my hairstyle. There's no reason not to. It's not like my hairstyle has any impact on gameplay whatsoever. And the retail animations and skins as a toggle that only is visible to whoever turns it on, I don't think that would be a bad thing necessarily. I just expect that there's actually quite a bit of work that would need to go into them because I'm pretty sure there's some animations that the new models just don't have. And there's just things and aspects about the rigging for them that it's probably a fair bit of work. And if it is, again, there's probably better things for the classic team to be spending their time on. But in general, especially in Season of Discovery, my take on quality of life is, yeah, bring it on. There's a lot of things that can be added to Classic that aren't a material change to the Classic feel. They're just simple quality of life that make things nicer and better. Like, put the calendar feature from, I think it was Wrath that it was added. Just put the calendar feature in the game. It's so useful to have. Why do I have to tab out to check when the Dark Moon Fair is? Anyway, that'll wrap us up for this week. Thank you so much for watching. And please do continue to leave any comments or questions you have. And remember to praise the algorithm by giving it a like and subscribing if you haven't already. I promise I'm going to stop saying that in every video before too long, but it really helps, especially while I'm just sort of getting this thing going again. So thank you to everyone who does hit those buttons. Also, remember, you can find me on pretty much every social media site under the name Devololore. That's Devolore. Next week, I'm not sure yet what topic we're going to cover. I've got a few potential subjects in mind, but if there's anything you'd like to hear me ramble about, again, leave me a comment. Let me know. Thanks again. I'll see you next week.